We return to the varieties of religious experience, a study in human nature by William James. We are in lecture 1, Religion and Neurology. But now I ask you, how can such an existential account of facts of mental history decide in one way or another upon their spiritual significance? According to the general postulate of psychology just referred to, there is not a single one of our states of mind, high or low, healthy or morbid, that has not some organic process as its condition. Scientific theories are organically conditioned just as much as religious emotions are. And if we only knew the facts intimately enough, we should doubtless see the liver determining the dicta of the sturdy atheist as decisively as does those of the Methodist under conviction, anxious about his soul. When it alters in one way the blood that percolates it, we get the Methodist. When, in another way, we get the atheist form of mind. So, with all our raptures and our dryness is our longings and our pantings, our questions and beliefs, they are equally organically founded, be they of religious or of non-religious content. To plead the organic causation of a religious state of mind, then in refutation of its claim to possess superior spiritual value, is quite illogical and arbitrary, unless one have already worked out in advance some psychophysical theory connecting spiritual values in general with determinate sorts of physiological change. Otherwise, none of our thoughts and feelings, not even our scientific doctrines, not even our disbeliefs, could retain any value as revelations of the truth, for every one of them, without exception, flows from the state of their possessor's body at the time. It is needless to say that medical materialism draws, in point of fact, no such sweeping skeptical conclusion. It is sure, just as every simple man is sure, that some states of mind are inwardly superior to others, and reveal to us more truth. And in this it simply makes use of an ordinary spiritual judgment. It has no physiological theory of the production of these its favorite states, by which it may accredit them, and its attempt to discredit the states which it dislikes, by vaguely associating them with the nerves and liver, and connecting them with names connoting bodily affliction. It is altogether illogical and inconsistent. Let us play fair in this whole matter, and be quite candid with ourselves and with the facts. When we think certain states of mind superior to others, is it ever because of what we know concerning their organic antecedents? No. It is always for two entirely different reasons. It is either because we take an immediate delight in them, or else it is because we believe them to bring us good consequential fruits for life. When we speak disparagingly of feverish fancies, surely the fever process as such is not the ground of our disesteem, for aught we know to the contrary, 103 degrees or 104 degrees Fahrenheit might be a much more favorable temperature for truths to germinate and sprout in, and the more ordinary blood heat of 97 or 98 degrees. It is either the disagreeableness itself of the fancies, or their inability to bear the criticisms of the convalescent hour. When we praise the thoughts which health brings, health's peculiar chemical metabolisms, we have nothing to do with determining our judgment. We know, in fact, almost nothing about these metabolisms. It is the character of inner happiness in the thoughts which stamps them as good, or else their consistency with our other opinions and their serviceability for our needs, which make them pass for true in our esteem. Now, the more intrinsic and the more remote of these criteria do not always hang together. Inner happiness and serviceability do not always agree. What immediately feels most good is not always most true. when measured by the verdict of the rest of experience. The difference between Philip drunk and Philip sober is the classic instance of corroboration. If merely feeling good could decide, drunkenness would be the supremely valid human experience, but its revelations, however acutely satisfying at the moment, are inserted into an environment which refuses to bear them out for any length of time. The consequence of this discrepancy of the two criteria is the uncertainty which still prevails over so many of our spiritual judgments. There are two moments of sentimental and mystical experience, we shall hereafter hear much of them, that carry an enormous sense of inner authority and illumination with them when they come. But they come seldom, and they do not come to everyone, and the rest of life makes either no connection with them or tends to contradict them more than it affirms them. Some persons follow more the voice of the moment in these cases. Some prefer to be guided by the average results. Hence the sad discordancy of so many of the spiritual judgments of human beings, a discordancy which will be brought home to us acutely enough before these lectures end. It is, however, a discordancy that can never be resolved by any merely medical test. A good example of the impossibility of holding strictly to the medical tests is seen in the theory of the pathological causation of genius, promulgated by recent authors. Genius, said Dr. Moreau, is but one of the many branches of the neuropathic tree. Genius, says Dr. Lombroso, is a symptom of hereditary degeneration of the epileptoid variety, and is allied to moral insanity. Well, puberty kind of can be considered moral insanity in that way, because you have an independent morality, or mesolimbic system, and a independent ability to control yourself, mesocortical system. But not always agreeing with everybody is not quite the same thing as insanity, now is it? Whatever a man's life, writes Mr. Nisbet, is once sufficiently illustrious and recorded with sufficient fullness to be a subject of probable study, he inevitably falls into the morbid category, and it is worthy of remark that as a rule, the greater the genius, the greater the unsoundness. Now to these authors, after having succeeded in establishing to their own satisfaction that the works of genius are fruits of disease, consistently proceed thereupon to impugn the value of the fruits. Do they deduce a new spiritual judgment from their new doctrine of existential conditions? Do they frankly forbid us to admire the productions of genius from now onwards, and say outright that no neuropath can ever be a revealer of new truth? No, their immediate spiritual instincts are too strong for them here, and hold their own against inferences which, in mere love of logical consistency, medical materialism, ought to be only too glad to draw. One disciple of the school indeed has striven to impugn the value of works of genius in a wholesale way, such works of contemporary art, namely as he himself is unable to enjoy, and they are many, by using medical arguments. But for the most part the masterpieces are left unchallenged, and the medical line of attack either confines itself to such secular productions as everyone admits to be intrinsically eccentric, or else addresses itself exclusively to religious manifestations, and then it is because the religious manifestations have been already condemned, because the critic dislikes them on internal or spiritual grounds. In the natural sciences and industrial arts, it never occurs to anyone to try to refute opinions by showing up their author's neurotic constitution. Opinions here are invariably tested by logic and experiment, no matter what may be their author's neurological type. And they're saying C. Max Nordau's book called Degeneration, and J. F. Nisbet's The Insanity of Genius, 3rd edition, London, 1893, page 16 and 24. Their value can only be ascertained by spiritual judgments directly passed upon them, judgments based on our own immediate feeling primarily, and secondarily on what we can discern of their experiential relations to our moral needs and to the rest of what we hold as true. Immediate luminousness, in short, philosophical reasonableness, and moral helpfulness are the only available criteria. St. Teresa might have had the nervous system of the placidest cow, and it would not now save her theology if the trial of the theology by these other tests should show it to be contemptible. And conversely, if her theology can stand these other tests, it will make no difference how hysterical or nervously off her balance St. Teresa may have been when she was with us here below. You see that at bottom we are thrown back upon the general principles by which the empirical philosophy has always contended that we must be guided in our search for truth. Dogmatic philosophies have sought for tests for truth which might dispense us from appealing to the future, some direct mark by noting which we can be projected immediately and absolutely now and forever against all mistake. Such has been the darling dream of philosophic dogmatists. It is clear that the origin of the truth would be an admirable criterion of this sort, if only the various origins could be discriminated from one another. From this point of view, and the history of dogmatic opinion shows that the origin has always been a favorable test. Origin in immediate intuition, origin in pontifical authority, origin in supernatural revelation, as by vision, hearing, or unaccountable impression, origin in direct possession by a higher spirit, expressing itself in prophecy and warning, origin in automatic utterances, generally. These origins have been stock warrants for the truth of one opinion after another, which we find represented in religious history. The medical materialists are, therefore, only so many belated dogmaticists, neatly turning the tables on their predecessors by using the criterion of origin in a destructive instead of accreditative way. They are effective with their talk of pathological origin only so long as supernatural origin is pleaded by the other side, and nothing but the argument from origin is under discussion. But the argument from origin has seldom been used alone, for it is too obviously insufficient. Because it's not just origin, what's been done with it, too. I mean, unless you're a fanatic and it's about the teacher, and it's like, oh, how great our teacher. What about you? You know. What about the continuing path? Dr. Maudsley is perhaps the cleverest of the rebuters of supernatural religion on grounds of origin, yet he finds himself forced to write, "What right have we to believe nature under any obligation to do her work by means of complete minds only? She may find an incomplete mind a more suitable instrument for a particular purpose. It is the work that is done and the quality in the worker by which it was done that is alone of moment, and it may be no great matter from a cosmical standpoint if in other qualities of character he was singly defective, if indeed he were a hypocrite, adulterer, eccentric, or lunatic. Home we come again, then to the old and last resort of certitude, namely the common assent of mankind, or of the competent by instruction and training among mankind." And we have a quote with some dots in the middle before home, from H. Maudsley's Natural Causes and Supernatural Seemings, 1886, pages 257 and 256. In other words, not its origin, but the way in which it works on the whole is Dr. Maudsley's final test of a belief. This is our own empiricist criterion, and this criterion the stoutest insisters on supernatural origin have also been forced to use in the end upon the visions and messages some say have always been too patently silly. Among the trances and convulsive seizures some have been too fruitless for conduct and character to pass themselves off as significant, still less as divine. In the history of Christian mysticism, the problem how to discriminate between such messages and experiences as were really divine miracles, and such others as the demon in his malice was able to counterfeit. Well, if it's experiences and miracles of the demons, then it really was. But not to the same ends, right? thus making the religious person twofold more the child of hell he was before, has always been a difficult one to solve, needing all the sagacity and experience of the best directors of conscience. In the end, it had to come to our empiricist criterion. By their fruits ye shall know them, not by their roots. Well, both, really, but Jonathan Edwards' treatise on religious affections is an elaborate working out of this thesis. The roots of a man's virtue are inaccessible to us. No appearances whatever are infallible proofs of grace. Our practice is the only sure evidence, even to ourselves, that we are genuinely Christians. Informing, this is why this is going the more, well, there is no Christian time of year, but you know what I mean. Closer to Easter and in December, Informing a judgment of ourselves now, Edwards writes, we should certainly adopt that evidence which our supreme judge will chiefly make use of when we come to stand before him at the last day. There is not one grace of the Spirit of God, of the existence of which in any professor of religion, Christian practice is not the most decisive evidence. The degree in which our experience is productive practice shows the degree in which our experience is spiritual and divine. Catholic writers are equally emphatic. The good dispositions which a vision or voice or other apparent heavenly favor leave behind them are the only marks by which we may be sure that they are not possible deceptions of the tempter. Says St. Teresa, like imperfect sleep, which instead of giving more strength to the head, doth but leave it the more exhausted, the result of mere operations of the imagination is but to weaken the soul. Instead of nourishment and energy, she reaps only lassitude and disgust, whereas a genuine heavenly vision yields to her a harvest of ineffable spiritual riches and an admirable renewal of bodily strength. I allege these reasons to those who so often accuse my visions of being the work of the enemy of mankind and the sport of my imagination. I showed them the jewels which the divine hand had left with me. They were my actual dispositions. All those who knew me saw that I was changed. My confessor bore witness to the fact. This improvement, palpable in all respects, far from being hidden, was brilliantly evident to all men. As for myself, it was impossible to believe that if the demon were its author, he could have used in order to lose me and lead me to hell. An expedient so contrary to his own interest as that of uprooting my vices and filling me with masculine courage and other virtues instead, for I saw clearly that a single one of these visions was enough to enrich me with all that wealth. I fear I may have made a longer excursus than was necessary, and that fewer words would have dispelled the uneasiness which may have arisen among some of you as I announce my pathological program. At any rate, you must all be ready now to judge the religious life by its results exclusively, and I shall assume that the bugaboo of morbid origin will scandalize your piety no more. Still, you may ask me if its results are to be the ground of our final spiritual estimate of religious phenomenon. Why threaten us at all with so much existential study of its conditions? Why not simply leave pathological questions out? To this I reply in two ways. First, I say irrepressible curiosity imperiously leads one on, and I say, secondly, that it always leads to a better understanding of a thing's significance, to consider its exaggerations and perversions, its equivalents and substitutes, and the nearest relatives elsewhere. Not that we may thereby swamp the thing in the wholesale condemnation which we pass on its inferior congeners, but rather that we may, by contrast, ascertain the more precisely in what its merits consist, by learning, at the same time, to what particular dangers of corruption it may also be exposed. Insane conditions have this advantage, that they isolate special favors of the mental life and enable us to inspect them unmasked by their more usual surroundings. They play the part in mental anatomy which the scalpel and the microscope play in the anatomy of the body. To understand a thing rightly, we need to see it both out of its environment and in it, and to have acquaintance with the whole range of its variations. The study of hallucinations has, in this way, been for psychologists the key to their comprehension of normal sensation. That of illusions has been the key to the right comprehension of perception. Morbid impulses and imperative conceptions, fixed ideas so called, have thrown a flood of light on the psychology of the normal will. The obsessions and delusions have performed the same service for that of the normal faculty of belief. Similarly, the nature of genius has been illuminated by the attempts, of which I already made mention, to class it with psychopathical phenomena, borderland insanity, crankiness, insane temperament, loss of mental balance, psychopathic degeneration, to use a few of the many synonyms by which it has been called, has certain peculiarities and liabilities which, when combined with the superior quality of intellect in an individual, make it more probable that he will make his mark and affect his age than if his temperament were less neurotic. There is, of course, no special affinity between crankiness as such and superior intellect, for most psychopaths have feeble intellects and superior intellects more commonly have normal nervous systems, but the psychopathic temperament, whatever be the intellect with which it finds itself paired, often brings with it a door and excitability of character. The cranky person has extraordinary emotional susceptibility. He is liable to fixed ideas and obsessions. His conceptions tend to pass immediately into belief and action, and when he gets a new idea, he has no rest till he proclaims it, or in some way works it off. What shall I think of it? A common person says to himself about a vexed question, but in a cranky mind, what must I do about it? Is the form of the question tends to make. In the autobiography of that high-souled woman, Miss Annie Besant, I read the following passage. Plenty of people wish well to any good cause, but very few care to exert themselves to help it, and still fewer will risk anything in its support. Someone ought to do it, but why should I? Is the ever re-echoed phrase of weak need and ability. Someone ought to do it, so why not I? Is the cry of some earnest servant of man, eagerly forward, springing to face some perilous duty. Between these two sentences lie whole centuries of moral evolution. Well, in a way, not really. But so they think, right? True enough, and between these two sentences lie also the different destinies of the ordinary sluggard and the psychopathic man. Thus, when a superior intellect and a psychopathic temperament coalesce, as in the endless permutations and combinations of human faculty, they are bound to coalesce often enough in the same individual. We have the best possible condition for the kind of effective genius that gets into the biographical dictionaries. Superior intellect, as Professor Bain has admirably shown, seems to consist in nothing so much as in large development of the faculty of association by similarity. Such men do not remain mere critics and understanders with their intellect. Their ideas possess them, they inflict them, for better or worse, upon their companions or their age. It is they who get counted when Messrs. Lombroso, Nisbet, and others invoke statistics to defend their paradox. Because the usual thing is not always the individual thing. So when I say usual or as a group or that sort of thing, I'm not talking about the individual. I don't know about the individual. Some of the best groups have some of the worst individuals, and some of the worst groups have some of the best individuals in some category, right? To pass now to religious phenomena, take the melancholy, which, as we shall see, constitutes an essential moment in every complete religious evolution. Take the happiness which achieved religious belief confers. Take the trance-like states of insight into truth, which all religious mystics report. These are each and all of them special cases of kinds of human experience of much wider scope. Religious melancholy, whatever peculiarities it may have, quo religious, is at any rate melancholy. Religious happiness is happiness. Religious trance is trance. And the moment we renounce the absurd notion that a thing is exploded away as soon as it is classed with others or its origin is shown, the moment we agree to stand by experimental results and inequality in judging of values, who does not see that we are likely to ascertain the distinctive significance of religious melancholy and happiness? Are religious trances far better by comparing them as conscientiously as we can with other varieties of melancholy, happiness, and trance, than by refusing to consider their place in any more general series, and treating them as if they were outside of nature's order altogether? And he may refer to the criticism of the insanity theory of genius in the Psychological Review to page 287, which was published in 1895. I hope that the course of these lectures will confirm us in this supposition as regards the psychopathic origin of so many religious phenomena that would not be in the least surprising or disconcerting, even were such phenomena certified from on high to be the most precious of human experiences. No one organism can possibly yield to its owner the whole body of truth. And, well, rather than this experience-seeking model, which is fine, you can include that as part of it, beliefs and actions in the religious model obviously matter more. And with the Master Path lectures or something like this guy saying, no, religion is relationship with it all. It's not just emotionalism, and then philosophy is just intellectualism. He oversimplifies things to the point where it seems to be misleading. Well, few of us are not in some way infirm or even diseased, and our very infirmities help us unexpectedly. In the psychopathic temperament, we have emotionality, which is the sine qua non of moral perception. We have the intensity and tendency to emphasize, which are the essence of practical moral vigor, and we have the love of metaphysics and mysticism, which carry one's interest beyond the surface of the sensible world. What then is more natural than that this temperament should introduce one to regions of religious truth, to corners of the universe which your robust Philistine type of nervous system, forever offering its biceps to be felt, thumping its breast and thanking heaven that it hasn't a single morbid fiber in its composition, would be sure to hide forever from its self-satisfied possessors. And in the 30s, they wanted to rename the place Palestine. The Romans, again, call it Palestine for the first time. As much as its wallowers for the she devil, Tiamat, Tam, and Leviathan is the, thing. It's not really an appropriate term for those people. Now, there were a lot more Satanists spread throughout the area, it seems, but, if there were such a thing as inspiration from a higher realm, it might well be that the neurotic temperament would furnish the chief condition of the requisite receptivity. And having said thus much, I think that I may let the matter of religion and neuroticism drop. The mass of collateral phenomena, morbid or healthy, which the various religious phenomena must be compared in order to understand them better, forms what, in the slang of pedagogics, is termed the apperceiving mass, by which we comprehend them. The only novelty that I can imagine this course of lectures to possess lies in the breadth of the apperceiving mass. I may succeed in discussing religious experiences in a wider context than has been useful in university courses.